Hello, everyone. In terms of workplaces, I've been very privileged, and as you can see, my current one is no exception. During my 8 years running Aunan Lodge, I've been getting a very close-up view of how nature experiences are affecting people. I can see how my guests, they loosen up, they lighten up. You can see virtually how the colors of their faces changes. Nature experiences provides health. And as for the lady you just saw in the video, I'm sure that the experience of landing that salmon would have added a couple of years to her life if it wasn't for lighting that enormous cigar at the end. The Atlantic salmon is a wild wonder. And how do we conserve this wild wonder? I'm afraid, not very good. Here you can see the development of the wild Atlantic salmon in the North Atlantic region from 1960 till 2008. There's been a huge decline, and the aggregated catches have gone down with 75% during the period. Of the remaining stocks of wild Atlantic salmon, Norway is now responsible for 1/3. And unfortunately, Norway too is also failing in the responsibility of protecting the salmon. Here you can see the development in Norway for the last almost 30 years. And there's been a decrease of about 50%. And it's a very sad fact that 120 of 450 Norwegian salmon rivers were closed last summer due to weak stocks. And there are various reasons for this, and the reasons vary from river to river. But in some rivers, energy production is an important factor. For many decades, there have been numerous examples of conflicts of interest between conservationists and hydropower producers. I want to show you just a couple of examples from my own river, the Orkla. The Orkla has been regulated now for almost 30 years. And I must say that this regulation has been gentle to the degree you can actually use such a word about a river regulation. There's a lot of good conservation work going on in this river, so the stock of salmon is still pretty robust. As you can see on this picture, the river regulation has an effect on the aesthetics and the natural environment in the river. This is from the Bjørset Dam in Meldal, where a big portion of the water is taken out of the river to produce energy. And this is one of the classical areas of conflicts between river regulations and the environment. On this picture, the river is running from left to right, and you can see the big difference in water level above and below the dam. Less water in the river means less water for the salmon to find food and to find shelter. Another problem in the Orkla with the regulation is water temperature. This is Granasjøen. It's an artificial lake that was built for the Orkla regulation. You can see the dam there in the foreground. This lake is located about 15 kilometers from my fishing lodge up in the mountains. And when the hydropower company wants to produce energy with the water from this lake, it's being tapped from the bottom of the lake. So it's cold bottom water that's used for the energy production. So this cold water feeds the power station, and it's then eventually let out into the river. And in this particular case, it means virtually right on the doorstep of my fishing lodge. And during a summer, we're talking about huge amounts of water, and this water can be very cold, up to 10 centigrades colder than the water that runs naturally through the river. And you might ask, why is this a problem? You know, we're fishing, not swimming. But for the anglers, this is not a big problem, but for the salmon, it is. A colder river means that the river will produce less food, so fewer salmon juveniles will find enough food to grow up because of this cold water. A Cedron researcher said this summer that flexible water outlets in hydro lakes can improve salmon production with 10 to 30%. So a flexible water outlet where you can control the temperature of the water can give you an increased production like this. And for salmon stock under strong pressure, this is a very valuable contribution. So this is a case that I'm very concerned about, and others also in the Orkla Valley, and we're arguing this towards the hydropower industry and the authorities. So this was a couple of examples from my river about conflicts of interest, and as I said just before, there are numerous similar examples from rivers all over Norway. And also, today's main subject, as we've heard, there are some very fascinating possibilities, but obviously also there are some conflicts of interest that will arise. So it's going to be a very interesting debate. The point I want to make is that for this particular case, can Norway become Europe's green battery? As for the local examples from my river, and I think also for the other discussions all around Norway where hydropower production meets the environment, I think there are good reasons to be positive. And that's the main point I want to make here today. I want to give the hydropower industry some credit. I believe that the hydropower industry have acknowledged the problems that their activities represent. There's also a consensus on facts and knowledge, and this combined gives a good foundation for a constructive dialogue. So again, I want to give the hydropower industry credit for this. And I also believe that some other big industries in Norway can learn something from this when it comes to salmon conservation. Of course, I'm not saying it's all going to be nice and easy. These dialogues around the country can at times be both emotional and heated. Like here, in Dirdalselva in Rogaland. This is an article from last week's paper, and as you can see from the headline, the atmosphere is boiling. And it's a classical conflict here as well. You have the Hunters and Anglers Association fuming about the local power company's plans to regulate this river. And here on this picture, you have the angler to the left and the power company guy to the right. And standing there in the middle in the background, smiling a bit nervously, you have a civil servant from the directorate. And I want to finish up with talking a little bit about the authorities. Because at the end of the day, it's the authorities that will make the decisions. They will have to balance the facts and knowledge. They will have to listen to the involved parties and, at the end, make the decision that they believe is the best for the common good. This is an older article. It's from 1978, and it's from Berkåk, and it's just a few months before the regulation of the Orkla was to be voted over in the parliament. So this was a public meeting, and 3 members of parliament were attending this meeting. And one of them was Mr. Odd Einar Dørum, and he was quoted in this article saying the following: "There is an alternative to river regulation, and that is energy saving. With the knowledge we have today about what can be saved, this is a real alternative." Well, we know a lot more today than we did in 1978. And I believe that in order to preserve biodiversity, there has to be some serious changes to the way we consume energy and other resources. So, to conclude and sum it all up, I'm very pleased that there is a constructive climate for the dialogue between hydropower producers and conservationists, but we also need politicians that are prepared to go against the current and make some difficult decisions. Thanks.